recently had the request to go over the propane systems on my boat, and it's fairly simple. I have one tank solely dedicated to my stove and oven, and a second tank that's solely dedicated to the wall furnace behind me. So it makes things very easy to manage as far as propane usage goes and to monitor. And I'll just go over quickly how that's all set up, how I use it, and any safety items related to using propane on a boat. First, let's look at the location of my tanks. And you can see behind the wheel there at the helm, I have two enclosed seats. One on the right, which is the port side, and one on the left, which is the starboard side, because we're looking aft right now. So the nice thing about this boat is that the tank on this side here, which is my port, is dedicated to the wall furnace, which is on the port side of the cabin. And the tank on this side, which is on my starboard, is dedicated to the stove and oven, which is on the starboard side of the cabin. And I have a 10-pound aluminum tank in each of these lockers. Let's take a look at the propane tank on the starboard side of the boat. I simply lift the lid. I have my shutoff valve here. I have a gauge that tells me how much pressure is in the tank. And I have a solenoid. So I can't operate this propane without having the tank turned on, so I'll do that now. And I leave these in the off position when I'm not using them as a safety. And I also have the propane solenoid as a safety. So I have the exact same setup in the other locker on the port side. So I'm just going to show you what I have here, and rather than going over it twice. So once I've opened the tank, I see I have lots of pressure, and I'll close the seat up and let's go downstairs and take a look there. Before we go downstairs, I should just mention that because my propane tanks are in enclosed spaces, I do have a vent at the bottom of this locker that will vent any fumes that might be trapped in that enclosure to the outside of the boat. Now that I've opened the valve on the propane tank, I come over to my breaker panel here and I look for propane gas solenoid, turn the breaker on, and a way that I know that the solenoid is on is that red light goes on for the solenoid control. Now that I've turned on the propane tank on the starboard side, I've turned the breaker on for the propane gas solenoid. I've checked that the light is on, knowing that the solenoid is operating. I can use the stove or oven on the starboard side. To light the stove is very simple. Just get my lighter, turn the knob for the appropriate burner, turn it, and it's instantly on. Now gas burns a lot hotter than an electric stove. So if you're used to cooking with an electric stove, it's something that you have to get used to. But it is an adjustable flame. I can turn it right down. And when I'm ready to turn this off, I can either simply just turn it off with the knob, or I can go up top and turn off the propane right at the tank, and that would drain all the propane out of the line. Some people are surprised that I actually have an oven on board, but it works just like a regular oven, just runs on propane. And I've cooked everything in here from pizza to chicken. I've baked cookies. I guess you could use it just like a regular oven. I can see it needs a bit of a cleaning now that I've just taken a closer look at it. So I have my controls up here. These are for the burners up top, and then I simply just have a fourth control that is for the oven. So all I do is I turn this control on, and I light a pilot light underneath. I'll adjust the camera here so I can show you me lighting it. And then it has a thermostat in the back, so it actually can regulate its heat at a temperature that you want. It doesn't just get hotter and hotter and hotter. I can set it to 350 or 425 or anything in between. It's all on the dial here to show me what temperature I want in the oven. Now you can see the pilot light and the burner. So I simply bring my lighter in, light it right next to the pilot light. I turn my control to pilot, and right away you can see the pilot light is ignited. Now I'll turn the temperature up to say 400, and once that pilot light is warm enough, it will ignite the burner, which doesn't take too long. There you can see it's already lit. And I've asked the oven to stay at 400, so what will happen is once it reaches the desired temperature, the burner will turn off, the pilot light stays on, and then once the temperature drops a bit, it'll reignite the burner to maintain that 400 degrees that I've asked for. So to turn this off, it's the same thing. You can turn it off with the knob, or you can turn it off at the tank, which would then drain the propane out of the lines. One of the things you might ask is, how do you cook when your boat is heeled over while you're cruising? So right now it's locked. It won't move at all. But I simply release that. And now when the boat's heeled over, my stove and oven will always stay level. And I've cooked many times in the oven and on the stovetop while under sail and while the boat is heeled over. Works really well. One of the things I might get is there's some clamps that go on the outer rail here. Just a second level of safety so the pot doesn't move. And the liquid will always stay level, at least, with this gimbal. The other propane system I have on the boat is the wall furnace, which is mounted at the bulkhead on the port side of the cabin. And like I mentioned before, the tank outside at the helm, in that enclosed seat on the port side of the boat, is dedicated to the wall furnace on the port side of the cabin. I'm not going to get into too much detail on how this unit works. If you want to see that, I have a previous video. It's called How I Heat My Boat. And I simply just unlock the door. It's a sealed unit. I use my lighter. I turn on the ignition. I have to hold that in for 5 or 6 seconds. Then I can close the door. I'm still holding down the ignition knob. Probably for another 5 or 6 seconds. Now I can release that, and I'll just turn it to the high position. As this warms up, the flame will become more orange, and this unit throws quite a bit of heat. So to turn this off, I can turn it off with the knob here, or I could turn it off at the propane tank, and that would drain all the propane out of the system. I've already covered off one safety item when you're using propane on a boat, and that is to have the propane solenoid. Another one I have is this carbon monoxide detector. So whenever I'm using the propane system, this is on. It's hardwired to the boat. And that's the unit there. And here is the little sniffer. So I have one placed under the stove, so it's close to the source of the propane. And we'll swing over. There's my wall furnace. And I have the second sniffer right near the wall furnace. So I'm kind of a big believer in doubling up on safety, and when it comes to carbon monoxide, it's literally a deadly incident if there was a leak and I was on board. So in addition to having that hardwired unit with the 2 sniffers, I've installed a second unit, and this is something that you could just use for your house or your RV or your boat, and it's battery operated. So I swap those batteries out every 6 months, and this unit is always on. The other unit only is on when I have the propane solenoid on, so I'm not running it 24/7, but this unit is running 24/7, and it's just for the main cabin area, but it's more than enough to detect a carbon monoxide leak in the cabin. And the last thing I have for safety and operating propane on the boat is I have my second fire extinguisher, which is required as a safety item on this boat when there's other fuel systems on the boat other than your main engine. So I have that just mounted in the main cabin area, and it's easily accessible if I ever had a fire relating to either my wall furnace or the stove. There was a quick look at the propane systems on my boat, and of course from boat to boat systems will vary and locations of tanks will vary, what units they're dedicated to will vary. And one of the things I didn't really go over was usage. If you want to watch my video on how I heat my boat, I've detailed in the narrative in the comments all the usage and efficiency ratings for the wall furnace behind me, and for the stove and oven I don't actually have that data, but I can tell you that it's the middle of December 2014, and I started going through my receipts to figure out when's the last time I actually filled that 10-pound propane tank, and it was April of 2014 that I filled it. So it's probably going to be empty soon, but that gives you an idea. And I cook enough, maybe not as much as I would like to, but maybe if I was more of a baker, I would have run that tank out by now. But anyways, they're both efficient systems, and they're safe systems as long as you have some safety items in place to make using propane on a boat a safe experience. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.